Hey everybody, part 3 of our Unit 2 review, picking back up where we left off yesterday with the presidency and the executive branch. So one thing that we didn't get a chance to really cover in class for this unit before school ended is that the AP exam likes to focus a lot on relationships between the branches of government, right? Interaction. So one of the big things that they like to focus in on especially strongly is president having some sort of tension with members of Congress. And there's a lot of different things um, that can happen here, but the main reason for this tension is pretty simple. So I want you to think about Brian Higgins compared to Donald Trump. Okay, Brian Higgins' job relies on doing what? His job relies on him meeting the needs of his constituents, and all of his constituents are here, right? They're in Buffalo, they're in Niagara Falls, right? Just this very small area of New York State, and that's really his main focus. Whereas the president is supposed to be, right, that he's kind of being held accountable by the country as a whole. So that alone makes tension, right? Congressmen and women have this sort of first and foremost accountability to the people that are in their constituency so that they can be reelected. It creates kind of a natural tension. Maybe Donald Trump wants to do something that benefits people in the South because that's really where he's struggling to try to find some sort of support. And obviously, Brian Higgins wouldn't like that because he would want his constituents in Buffalo to get that sort of focus from the president. Okay. Other types of tension that show up between the president, and this is actually with the Senate, relates especially to, if I can type it in here, hopefully, checks and balances. That system as a whole creates tension because think about it. If you're the president and you want to do something, right, there's always going to be a check on that power. And if you really want to get something done and you feel like members of another party or another branch of government are blocking you from doing that, that's going to cause some problems. So one of the biggest things that happens through the system of checks and balances that causes tension between the president and the Senate is appointment hearings. Okay, remember that the president gets to appoint members to his cabinet, gets to appoint ambassadors, kind of choose his own staff, things like that. And those appointments all have to be approved by the Senate. So you might remember I pulled up a picture here, talked about in class, Betsy DeVos. She is the education secretary, and she has kind of been controversial. A lot of people don't like her. They don't think that she really supports public education. She's a big member of proprietor of for-profit charter schools. So a lot of other parts of the country, there's charter schools that only exist with the sole purpose of making money. So not like CSAT, but some other charter schools that do that. And she hasn't always been seen as having the interests of public education as a whole in the country as her focus. So there's a lot of tension that existed during her appointment, and even now she gets questioned with almost every decision she made. She's often asked to come in front of the Senate and testify and answer questions about things that they're doing. She gets called out by a lot of senators. There's a lot of dislike there. So that's just one example. Same thing with ambassadors. President Trump can nominate an ambassador to Finland, for example, right? And that ambassador needs to be approved by the Senate. And same idea. If there's different political ideologies or ideas about what somebody who's qualified for that job should look like, and people don't agree with that, that can cause tension. If we want to throw in something that fits with all three branches of government, we could even say appointment of Supreme Court justices. Same idea, right? The Senate has to approve those appointments to the Supreme Court. There can be some tension that exists there if there's different ideologies and beliefs about what qualifications should be best used for those things. Okay. White House staffs, just people that work for the president of the White House, are usually responsible for trying to convince senators to approve different nominations and legislation that the president might want. So there's a lot of times tension just even that exists there. It's not necessarily directed to the president, but man, that guy that works for Trump that always comes and talks to me, I really don't like him. So just one other example before we move on here. Okay. So those Senate confirmations are very, 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 very important. But they're not as important, at least for cabinet members, ambassadors, and the White House staff, as those judicial appointments. Because remember, judges are appointed for life, right? A Supreme Court justice, the only way that they're going to leave is if they die or are basically choosing to retire. So that's the more kind of biggest power that he has in appointments. These ones, though, create a little bit more tension because they happen more frequently. Okay. Next thing, coming into another Federalist paper here. So Federalist number 70. Didn't get a chance to talk about this one too much, but it's pretty simple. Just like a lot of the other Federalist papers, it's written by Alexander Hamilton. You guys know already from U.S. history and just our discussions this year, Alexander Hamilton is a big proprietor of strong central government, having the federal government have more power than the state governments have. And basically, in Federalist 70, he's just touching on that having a strong single leader as the head of the executive branch was very, 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 very important. Okay. Think about a lot of the other founding fathers. They thought we fear tyranny, right? We don't want another king. So let's put power in the legislative branch. Let's have Congress be the most powerful body. Alexander Hamilton thought sort of the opposite. He thought that we need to have three branches of government, but we want this strong leader at the top of the executive branch that basically promotes accountability, right? Think about it this way. Right now, with the coronavirus crisis that's going on, right? Who gets thrown in the spotlight? Donald Trump. Who gets thrown in the spotlight? Donald Trump, right? And it consistently goes back to him. So what happens is he has to be accountable, and you've seen that there's been a shift in his demeanor about this entire thing. You can go back, whether you like Donald Trump or not, you can go back and see how what he's said about the crisis has kind of evolved over time from, oh, it's like the flu, it's not that big of a deal, to, yeah, I don't really know what's going on, to now, oh, I was calling it a pandemic before it was a pandemic, right? So it basically holds accountability there. One person is accountable, but also allows that one person at the head of the executive branch to be more decisive, okay? So if you think about it, the president, an executive order, right? That's just him making that decision, is a lot more effective at times than having all 435 members of the House of Representatives debating and discussing something to then pass it on to 100 senators for them to debate and discuss it before it's actually put into action. Okay. So in Federalist 70, what you need to know, powerful executive leads to accountability and more decisive action. Okay. I don't have a cool way like with factions putting a 10 in it to really remember Federalist 70. So you might just have to memorize that one. Okay. Requirements to be president in the United States. You have to be a U.S. citizen for at least 14 years. We also have to be born in the United States or U.S. territory. Um, so let's say that I was born in the U.S., then I moved, and then I came back. As long as I was a citizen for 14 years, I could then run for president as long as I was 45. President serves a 4-year term. And we know from U.S. last year and just our discussion of the amendments that the 22nd Amendment is really the only constitutional restriction placed on presidential power in terms of length of time in office. You might remember that before FDR, that there was sort of this precedent set by George Washington that presidents would only serve 2 terms, right? No president have ever served more than 2 terms until we get to FDR. And FDR, when you really think about it, inherits sort of a mess, right? He takes over during the Great Depression, gets reelected because some of his New Deal programs seem to be picking up, seem to be working, and then Pearl Harbor's bombed, and we get attacked. World War II starts, and we see that Americans throughout time, and this is something that's important to know about presidents too, we talked about it in yesterday's video, that during times of crisis or conflict, that Americans are very fearful usually of changing leadership. Again, using this crisis, it's actually been a really good year for you guys to learn about this stuff. Donald Trump's approval rating has actually gone up during this crisis, even though a lot of people are criticizing his response and what he's been doing and thought he could have done more. But it's very much that people see it as unpatriotic or un-American to criticize the government during times of crisis or during times of need. Okay, so FDR gets reelected again, gets reelected to a 4th term, and then dies during that 4th term. So after that happens, Congress is like, yeah, we probably should take some action on this. They create the 22nd Amendment. Easy 2 terms in office for the president. You can only be president for 10 years at most. So what does that mean? Well, I would say 10 years at most if it's 2 terms. The idea is if I'm a vice president and president dies and I take over, if he's in the 1st or 2nd year of that term, then that would count as a term for me, right? Because if I try to serve 2 terms after that, that'd be more than 10 years. But let's say that I'm vice president, the president dies the 3rd year into his term, there's only a year and a half left. I could finish that term and then run for 2 more terms because it would be less than 10 total years. All right, but basically what the 22nd Amendment does is it's sort of this realization by Congress, like, holy crap, everybody had done this before. They followed Washington's precedent. FDR didn't, and a lot of people say for good reason, but other people think that FDR was a little power hungry, right? And Now we really need to think about it. The president's become more powerful over time. In modern times, when there's more media out there, there's radios at this point, there's newspapers, all these things that the president can get his voice out there, that it made it easier for a president, if they wanted to abuse power. So putting in this 22nd Amendment sort of acknowledged the shift in the role of the president, that the president was going to be this really focal, powerful leader. FDR is kind of widely seen as one of the first American presidents that's like the quote unquote most powerful man in the world that we hear today about that office. So Congress puts us in as sort of another check on his power. Okay. Going back to the media and technology, a term we've talked about, the bully pulpit. Okay. A pulpit's just a place where you stand to kind of present something or speak. It comes from like churches. If you've ever been into a church where people go to read, or like a courtroom, sometimes they have a pulpit where somebody can stand and talk. Bullying, you've heard that term before, right? Kind of pushing people around, bossing somebody around, taking advantage of somebody. So the president has been able to use something known as the bully pulpit to get across their message. And basically, what it is, it's a combination of all of these types of communication and technology. All right. So think about today, TV, radio, and the internet. I guarantee you right now, if you were to stop my video, go to the TV and flip through the channels, you could probably find somebody that was either talking about the president or actually showing video of the president saying something, right? It's always out there. If you go to the internet and you type in Donald Trump, enter, millions and millions of results are going to pop up. So basically, that modern technology, presidents are able to communicate policy incentives, responses to issues and crises, address wider audiences than they ever could before, right? If I don't have radios, TVs, the internet, I'm going to talk and maybe some newspapers pick it up and it eventually slowly spreads across the country, but chances are the majority of people will not see it. So it's going to pick up that kind of communication that we want to see if we want widespread coverage. All right. Social media. Donald Trump is the king of Twitter, right? You go on Twitter every single day. Boom, 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 boom. He's sending tweets left and right. Allows you to know what he's thinking, whether you like it or don't like it. Easy way for a president to kind of post something to either boost the morale of the public, inform the public about a decision very, very quickly. Okay. If you really want to think about this, social media has actually made the president more powerful than ever before. And it's going to seem weird because I know a lot of you kind of roll your eyes when I talk about Donald Trump's Twitter account and how much he tweets. Obama had a Twitter account too. He didn't tweet as much, but he still was posting things on Twitter. He still does. If you think about it, the president's one man, right? If you want to follow somebody on Twitter and know what's going on in the government, chances are you're going to follow him. It does not matter that 535 members of Congress, right, both the House Representatives and the Senate combined, could have Twitter accounts because you might follow one or two of them, but they're not going to have the same sort of policy position, power, things like that, reach that the president would have. So by the president being able to reach out, and whether you follow him or not, chances are you might see some of his tweets because they're retweeted, they're favorited, right? So it's actually going to give more power to the president. And then the last thing we've talked about in class, you guys actually watched this one day when I was absent, nationally broadcast State of the Union. So the president gives a State of the Union address. That's happened all the way back to Washington, but now it's nationally broadcast on TV. You have the president on every major news network or every channel that is going to cover it. He's speaking. He's talking about exactly what he wants to do. He's going to announce major policy issues. He's going to maybe talk about some new sort of directive for the government. And it's an easy way for him to sort of, again, bully pulpit, push Congress into doing what he thinks is best for the country. So what does he think is best? What does he want the country to do? And that's really what he's going to focus on. Okay. So all those things combined, that bully pulpit, I'm kind of at the forefront. I'm the focus. I'm the center of our government. I am what people think about when they think about the United States of America because I'm the president. I'm a big deal. Listen to me, do what I want you to do. All right. So we'll stop there today. Big idea 3 coming tomorrow with the bureaucracy. I think you guys struggle with this a little bit, so hopefully that'll be able to clear things up for you guys. I hope you guys have a really good day. Keep watching the videos. I'll talk to you soon.